I'd like to introduce Laurenz and Eddie, managing partners at Duxton Consulting, who are going to be speaking with us on reimagining the customer experience, where interacting less with customers generates more value. And Duxton Consulting was founded in Singapore in 2009 to identify business opportunities for its clients based on deep understanding of human needs and behaviors.
Good morning, everyone. When Eddie and I prepared for this session, we had a little bit of a giggle. Actually, when you see the headline, it sounds a bit like real marketing, like making a bold statement. And Eddie, being this data scientist that he is, didn't quite feel, very kind of right with this. But then eventually we decided to keep the title because we feel it is about time to think about customer experience in different ways. And we believe the approach that we have that we want to talk about is actually indeed quite different. So, but I'll leave you to that, being the judge of it at the end of it. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the pillars that we feel are very, very critical when it comes to customer experience and reimagining that. And then we talk about a little case study that we're working at. So the first part of it that's very crucial to us is when we bring together, as we say, social science and data science. So you see, when it comes to research data, we grab everything that we can get, old data, that anything that the client might have, can be tracking, can be UNA, can be anything. But then we on top of it, we lay our psychological approach to it, where we do in-depth studies to understand what the needs are in the category and map this out and bring this all together on the research end. And then on the data end, of course, we tap into the first-party data, but we can tap into any data that we can get our hands on, depending on what the objective of the project, of course, is. Could be as far as like channel party data of distribution partners, third-party data, and even public data can make a huge impact for us when we kind of build our models. So think of weather data, actually, that makes quite some difference sometimes. So we bring this all together and have that platform for us when we get into a project like this. So that's the first pillar that's very crucial for us, first of all. Then second, we go into what are the critical elements where we apply this and how we're going to structure this. So we're going to talk about those three, the long-term thinking, the frameworks, as well as the POC. So when it comes to the long-term thinking, what we like to do with our clients when we have a real long kind of project, and reimagining customer experience obviously is one of those. We try to establish a consumer lab where we will be then part of the company and we will be embedded and have a direct access to the C-level, because whenever you get into a more transformational project, there will be lots of roadblocks and it can only be kind of removed when you have access to that. So we try to kind of establish these labs and have access to it. This is just an example from Celcom we've done in Malaysia, and we've done it in different forms for different companies. Second of all, we either hire or at least train staff so that we can pass on our approach to the people to, again, have that long-term approach and have a more structural way to kind of go about it, because every client likes to get rid of us after a few years so that they can actually do it themselves. Then thirdly, we kind of embed us into a workflow that's predetermined, that everyone has to go through the kind of approach that we're implementing. So stage gate processes, we would be a gate, and so forth, that we always will be embedded in the process of the company. And lastly, what's really critical in that is to have all stakeholders in the project, which is kind of normal, but here is very crucial because customer experience is something that touches almost everyone in the company. So that's a critical element of that as well. The second pillar that's really critical for us as well is to establish a framework so that we can keep everything that we understand throughout the work that we're doing. So it's the insights are structured kind of in a knowledge bank, as well as having everyone to understand, have access, full access to all the data and everything that we're kind of finding. So here are a couple of examples. First of all, on the research end, when we kind of use the psychological approach, We map out the category, understand what the category needs are with our usual framework, it's morphological psychology, and then we map out all the different need states that we can find within the market. And that then works as a frame that can keep everything and will always be used for any project that we're doing inside the company. And it then starts also to help us to segment the market and have needs-based segments that we can approach and understand. They're all based on psychological needs that drive behavior, and then can go into profiling and can use that framework as well for white space analysis and innovation, as well as for portfolio structures and so forth, once you understand what the category drivers are in terms of the need states, basically. So that will be on the research end, and then every project, everything we do will always kind of tie back to that framework that people inside the company know and understand where this is coming from and where this is going. And then that, of course, helps us to much better define target audiences and understand how to approach them. On the data end, what we're doing, of course, is to create that global profile of the customer. And we use for that, the customer data. We use and integrate research and Google and Facebook data and interactions, and then model this with our propensity models and so forth. So here's a case from Samsung. And I think maybe, Eddie, you can shed a little bit of light on how you went about building the infrastructure and making sure that everyone can tap into the data actually on a very regional footprint.
Yeah, Samsung was an interesting case where, they have a lot of data and they have a lot of subsidiaries, and getting started with them involved, getting data from Korea, getting data at the regional level, getting data at the individual country level, putting that all together from CRM, sales, marketing, third party, and building out this kind of customer-centric framework also involves a lot of stakeholder engagement in building. But at the end of the day, putting it together so that starting out with a prototype in a single market. I think we started with Australia, right? And here getting over all the challenges of data acquisition was one thing, but once you get through that, you kind of lead the company through a successful project where you can, in this case, what we did was we brought together some of that qualitative research for the segmentation, use that to build a model to apply that to their entire customer base, actually start building some models about predicting customer behavior, and showing some good results with low-hanging fruit. And I think there we were able to march that on to 8 other markets in this region, and then eventually actually expanded out to MENA. And so that was a great kind of validation of our approach for making this framework actually yield reproducible results.
So I felt like the results at the end, that.
Yes, I always kind of undersell the results, but we had really great results. Samsung's already fairly advanced in terms of what they do with their marketing and how they handle things. I think when we came in and we started developing their first propensity models for some of their flagship devices, we had huge results. Actually 2, 3, in some cases actually I think in our initial prototype market, a 5x improvement in actual conversions. Sales conversions, not just click-through conversions. So yeah.
So you can tell that he's a very humble guy, no? Anyway, so but the other interesting bit about this is that you also kind of helped install an infrastructure where everyone within the region could tap into the data sources from headquarters, right?
Yeah, because at least at Samsung, and I think not just at Samsung, a lot of institutions, that's a big deal, right? If you want to work with vendors at a given subsidiary or department level, having to make each one of those vendors go through that process of getting access to that data and all of the headache involved with that is a big problem. One of the things we did was actually set up a platform there where we managed getting through all those approvals, and then at the individual subsidiary levels, what department wants to work with their agency of record on a particular project, they were free to do so. And the other great thing was sort of the multiplier effect. So once we got through showing how this worked as a pattern in Australia, then they could see, okay, now we work with another agency on a different project in MENA, and those results cross-pollinate, which is a great multiplier in terms of the return on investment that the client got to see. Advancements we saw in Australia got to populate MENA, advancements that they did on different product categories and in MENA got to expand out to the other 9 regions here in Singapore, in Southeast Asia.
Okay. Anyway, so and here's just because you're also part of this next one. So the last pillar that we always find is super important when you go into a transformative kind of project, to have a first POC kind of project where then the leadership can actually buy into the approach. Here's one example that didn't pan out the way we wanted it to pan out eventually, but either way, so maybe just briefly talk about the Unilever case that we did in the Philippines.
Yeah, so this was one where they had an existing program of how to target the retailers in Philippines, the tindahan shops, the small sort of mom and pop shops, and through a promotional budget that they had. And what they were looking to do was basically, the reason we said it's an adaptive programming, promotion targeting engine basically, was because quarter to quarter objectives would change. It was increase the basket size, one quarter, then it was increase revenue, then it was increase profitability, increase frequency of purchase. So, the demands always changed. And the thing was, how can you use the research that we've collected about the type of consumer behavior that you're seeing at the end, plus the retailer behavior in terms of what they're purchasing, stocking, and preferring, and what kind of promotions that are sort of activating them, that you could sort of tweak to focus on the changing objectives, whether it was basket size or actual purchase frequency. And so we had great results. I think this was actually, we had a 24% revenue gain from 4 weeks after we started the project. We were actually able to launch and actually execute campaigns. I'd say the failure of this project was more a huge reorg that happened at Unilever. I think it was the biggest in their history, that basically cut the entire marketing budget for the region.
See, and that's why it's so important to have that access to the C-level.
Yes.
But anyway, so that's an example on the data side. Here's an example on the more qualitative and research side, and how psychological work does actually make sense, a difference. So we worked with Visa Consulting for many years, and one of the first projects was to map out what are the key psychological drivers for people to use their credit card, what they call top of wallet. I mean, which card do they actually use, the people out there? And we were able to use our psychological framework and then measured it throughout the region, and could actually show them that the key driver for top of wallet, and be reminded, this is like 8 years ago, so you will laugh about it today, but back in the days was a big deal, that control was actually the biggest driver for people to use their credit card. So anything that gives them transparency, gives them an understanding on how much they have been using the card, so give them that sense of control, they would rather prefer to use that card. So giving that insight, it was rather hard to sell this to any bank or anybody, because everyone would in the C-level would say, oh, I don't want to tell people how much they've used it, they don't use it anymore, which is completely opposite. And it was a long way to kind of make that sink in, to really understand. Today we all have our apps and we all know exactly how much we're spending. We get all these tools because that's in fact a huge driver. Right, but it's a long way to kind of make them understand this and buy into it. And we had the same in the telco industry when it came to roaming. Nobody wanted to tell people about roaming and how to kind of get away with it in a smaller. Now today everyone does it in little chunks and make it easy to control on how much you're using in terms of data. So control is a huge driver for many things, and that's why apps are so successful these days. Anyway, so that was a POC with Visa back in the days, and that's what it takes to make the management to kind of buy into your approach, to feel comfortable to get into a space like that. Okay. Now, moving on, we wanted to talk, when we agreed to this talk, we thought we would be able to kind of show you the results of this project, but because it got delayed for 4 months, we just started the second phase only a few weeks ago. So we can only show you bits of it and how we're going to lead this on, and we apologize for that. Out of our control, procurement made that happen. So anyway, so we're doing this project for a rather bigger regional bank here. And we did all the elements that we were talking about. We started doing those things. So we started to kind of map out the category needs when it comes to banking and financial needs in that particular market that we're dealing with. We started mapping this out, and that was phase 1, and that's all done. We've presented this, and we used this, and we have buy-in from management, and now we're in the second phase where we're quantifying all of these needs, and we're starting to then segment the market to understand it's usually 4 to 6 segments that are driven by these needs. So that's already happening. And what we then do, once we have these segments, we can tie back the segments to the database. Sorry. So because we have all, within the segmentation, we all have all the banking behaviors that we then can tie back to the database, and we can then flag each and every one customer on the database to understand what is the psychological kind of drivers behind that particular customer, which is really crucial to understand what's driving their behavior. So this is what we're currently doing, and on the data side, we've started to train the model to understand and include a propensity modeling in the database, so that eventually we can go in saying, okay, out of the database on the 15, 20 million customers, who has the highest propensity to agree to a fixed deposit, or to buy, to go into an investment, or even insurance eventually. So we are starting this, so we have intense conversation, as you can imagine, with the bank. Getting into their data is quite something. But we're in the middle of doing this and mapping that out currently. So once we have that, we can then go into a descriptive phase, a predictive and a prescriptive one. And we want to just outline what the plan is for this bank that we're going to roll out within the next 3 months, basically. So the vision that we're building is that for each and every customer on their database, we will know the segment that they belong to in terms of what are the psychological drivers behind it. This is just a dummy here, so I call it the social saver. Obviously, I cannot talk about it yet because we're still not doing it. But we will know then about this each and customer, what is driving their behavior when it comes to financials, what kind of saving types they are, what kind of investment type they are, what's really driving them behind. We will then also, of course, know their banking behaviors, obviously, because that's on the database. On top of that, we will know the propensity for them to buy into certain products. So here, as an example, for that particular customer, fixed deposit, they would belong to the top 15%, but not to the other ones. And then we can tell that on a rolling basis for every customer. And then, of course, we will know what are the key kind of drivers that identifies them for being kind of interested in that particular product. And with that, so I'm super confused with so many screens here, of course we can use this for upsell and cross-sell inside the bank, logic, doing that, as well as we can then, once we have identified that, we can model lookalikes for acquisition and find similar customers out there, and of course then measure this. So that's the descriptive part. So after 3 months, so by end of the year, we will have that, the entire database completely flagged by their belonging to whatever drives them psychologically, as well as what their propensity is to buy. Then the next part would be the descriptive part, and after the descriptive would be then the predictive part, and we can then go in and say, cool, let's say Alice, we know 70% likely to pick up fixed deposit. We know on the needs map what's driving her. We know when is the perfect time for her, and we will know what's the right means to approach her, what are the trigger points for her, and what's the best way to communicate with her on that model. So that will be kind of the next phase then in terms of predictive. We will run experiments there, and that was meant to be actually presented here today if we would have started in time. And then lastly, sorry, I'm rushing a little bit because Piers is pounding me on time. We will then go into a hyper-personalization, which is then the next phase of that kind of project, where we can then build in a more dynamic model where we can understand at what point in time people come onto the app, come onto the website, or whatever they're doing, what is the right message, what's the right thing to do. Eddie, any wise final words on this? Because I think that's the last slide.
I mean, the thing that I think we got excited about when we first started pitching this project was just, it was this marriage of social science and data science, right? I mean, I think from my side of it, I'm very focused on in the previous slide, on the what and the when. I don't really focus, and I don't really have the ability, just from looking at behavioral data that I'm collecting, the why. But the why is such a critical piece. I mean, in the messaging, right? I mean, even if you have a model that tells you this is the best time to target a particular customer at this particular time, being able to actually help the agencies and give them enough ammunition to actually craft the right message for them is something that's always lacking. And so we saw this as kind of a great marriage here in terms of actually putting this all together and kind of expanding both what the research side can provide, but also expanding what the data science side can traditionally provide.
That was really good. Thank you. No, actually, so that's what it is. And that's why we kept the title, to just come back to what I said in the beginning. We really want to reimagine customer experience. I think we can only do this by understanding the why as well as the what and the when. And we are actually implementing this within the next 3 months. We can give you very specific answers, as we're going to share with you on the other projects, on how much more the uptick is on the data side as well as on the social side, and how we kind of all bring this together. And we are, in fact, very excited about this. Plus, we were able to find a lot of clients actually doing it now. Yes. So that's the crazy part. So that is it. I hope I'm still in time. Thank you for your attention, and maybe we have some questions.
Building out predictions in terms of behaviors that are coming next, or building out predictions in terms of the audience and what they're going to do and how best to kind of leverage the needs that they have. Can it also help you in terms of, I guess, nudging certain behaviors that you're looking for in terms of kind of what you want them to do versus just predicting what they're going to do next?
I mean, so short answer, yes. Long answer is, I mean, I think to actually realize that, it's a bit of a significant investment to get there, because, I mean, at least from my side of it, I think of it as you're modeling treatments or interventions, right? So you're trying to model causality, to say, like, this is going to be the nudge that's going to have the desired effect. I mean, the traditional way of doing that in research would be, the gold standard of conducting lots of A/B tests, right? I think from the data side, we've been, working on things like causal inference models to kind of short circuit that. And we've had some projects already to try and realize that, but I think getting clients to the point at which they can actually realize that is a bit of a journey. I mean, going back to Laurenz's first point about kind of getting the right level of buy-in from the right, at the C level to sort of direct that kind of attention. I think if you've got that, there's a really definite yes. I was actually just at a talk yesterday from DBS where they were talking about how they just started implementing this as well in this region.
Now with more organisations looking at integrating AI into their marketing activation, how your conversations with clients in terms of, like you said, the journey and the merging of research data and behavioural data has evolved, because, I mean, obviously clients, and I was just thinking when you're talking about the why phase, arguably AI maybe allows a client to skip the why phase but still achieve the same outcomes in terms of identifying what's actually going to trigger a behavioural response. I'm just quite keen to hear what conversations you've been having and how that's evolved.
Maybe I take that first. So, great question. So first of all, the conversations are always very, very difficult, because getting buy-in to actually tap into the data of a client is taken a long, long time and a lot of trust and going through a lot of levels. So that remains to be difficult, but once you're in, then you're in, and that's why we always look at it as a long-term perspective. When it comes to differentiating between the why and the when and the what, the convenient way is saying, oh, it's enough if I know the what and the when, and it will give me more results, and that's true. But when you look at it from a perspective of having a better customer experience, then the why becomes more critical, because then customers feel that you kind of pick them up where they are and what they really want and what they're looking for, as opposed to bombard them at the time and with the certain project without really kind of catering to their needs. So I think probably there is no short answer to this question, but it's evolving, and clients get that more and more, but I think we're at the beginning of it, basically.